This is Twit.
I'd say the big news today was LG's event, right, Miriam? You were at a satellite event for the G3.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool what they did there. They basically said, hey, we're going to have this event in London. And of course, not everybody can make it to London. So how about we have a couple of smaller events in SF and New York for those media who can make it locally. So basically all they had a bunch of screens set up, for us to watch the live stream of the event. And at the end, they had a bunch of tables set up with basically a demo area with all the phones and accessories, and even a place for us to try some of the new camera features. So really kind of cool setup. And, so I did a hands-on, which is really kind of what I mostly wanted out of this, short of getting a review unit, which I don't have yet, but hopefully we'll get one soon. Mm-hmm. So, pretty awesome phone. I mean, I'm a big fan of the G2 and of the Nexus 5, which is kind of the G2 Nexus edition, if you want, right, since it's slightly simplified and a little more affordable. So this is showing us the G3, which is the next version. So what does that mean? That means perhaps we'll get a Nexus 6 or whatever, Nexus 5.5 or whatever out of that. Pretty exciting. So you're probably wondering, what's the big deal? The G2 was pretty much kind of like one of the best phones last year, right? So how could they have improved it? So this is what's kind of insane. They've gone for a quad HD display.
Yeah,
5.5 inches, and it's almost no bezel. This thing is just barely bigger than the G2 and has a 5.5 inch, are you ready for this? 2560 by 1440 pixel display. Something like 528 pixel per inch of resolution.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Right? But you think so. And I thought so until I saw it with my own eyes, and holy mother of whatever, this is like one hell of a display. It is hard to explain, but font rendering is even just further nice. You know how Full HD really makes a difference for font rendering? Mm-hmm. This kind of just kicks it up a little notch further. If you look at really tiny text on a website, it just looks so much better. And then the other thing is that really surprised me is looking at photos you've taken. Instantly, you get more detail, and you can actually see that detail on that display. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing I didn't expect at all. Like, I was like, okay, I don't have the best eyes. So I was like, okay, well, we're going to get better font rendering and some people are going to notice. But I really didn't think I would notice. And I certainly did not think I would notice the better image rendering. Because, when you start out with a 13 megapixel shot, you certainly have a lot more pixels to play with. So kind of a cool thing.
Hearing you talk about the display reminds me of when I was reviewing, I can't remember how long ago this was, the HTC Droid DNA. And that was the first HD display that I had seen on a smartphone. It was a 1080p display, first 1080p display that I saw. And I didn't know what to expect either. I was like, it kind of went into it just thinking like, oh, it's probably pretty darn unnecessary. The human eye can only actually blah, derp, der. But when and what it ended up selling me on it is when I opened up my Twitter client, Plume, and the level of detail of the tiny little avatars, the avatar screens. And it's such a very specific thing, but I could see things in those avatars that I just wasn't used to seeing on a phone. I was like, okay, I get it now. And then of course you see the fonts and the rounding and all that kind of stuff, and it starts to and then eventually your eyes just get adjusted to it. So hearing what you're saying, yes, this sounds somewhat unnecessary, but I would imagine that once you have it in front of you, and particularly once your eyes get adjusted to it, it'd be really hard to go backwards.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that all phones should have this feature, but like, it's a bit of a technical tour de force, right? Like, wow. And so here's what's even cooler. Now, this will have to be tested before we can say for sure that this is actually happening. But they have this thing they called A3, and I can't remember exactly what it stands for. But basically, they're doing adaptive timing on the display, like clock speed, frame rate, and another A, I can't remember. Basically, adaptive such that the battery life doesn't get impacted by the additional resolution.
Wow.
So they're basically, they put a 3,000 milliamp battery in that thing, and with a Snapdragon 801, which is state of the art, which you find on the HTC One M8 and on the Galaxy S5, apparently the battery life is the same as what we've experienced on the G2, which had a 2,800 milliamp hour battery. So there you go. Now that's one feature, the display, which I really just blew everybody's mind. And the other thing that I'm really excited about, because I'm a bit of a camera buff and a photography buff, the camera is an evolution of last year. So it's a 13 megapixel autofocus with OIS, which is optical image stabilization, but they've enhanced the OIS, so it's faster, more advanced version of OIS, which was already pretty damn awesome on the original G2. But here's the killer. Here's the kicker. Here's the feature that I think is a first that nobody's done on a phone before. We've seen this on cameras, a laser rangefinder for autofocus.
Right.
I'm not kidding you. Like, they just stuck a freaking laser on the left side of the camera, if you look at it, and it just bounces a beam off of whatever object you're focusing on the display by touching the display, and gets it back and measures the autofocus. The result is autofocus speeds of 265 milliseconds, which is the fastest in the industry. And I noticed it, like they had a demo set up where you could try that out with a Galaxy S5.
Right.
Next to it, and they'd actually like taken the logo off the Galaxy S5 so people couldn't figure out what it was. But everybody knows. And it was just really impressive, like how this thing can just so quickly follow focus that people, like the average person who just takes out the phone and hits the shutter button or hits the screen and takes a picture, will get it right pretty much every time now.
Oh, man.
And that's a huge improvement, right? For people like me who are like to frame our shots and go crazy, we'll get a better performance from the autofocus, especially at night, right? Because you'll be able to bounce that laser off of objects in the dark and get proper focus. But at the same time, those people who are just like the average user, just grab the phone and shoot, will just get awesome camera performance.